safe. Some of the software and stuff that I'm using may not necessarily be appropriate for your situation. However, because of all the technical stuff I have going on in the office and in my house, this is built specifically for me. However, it can be adapted for you. One of the issues, well, many issues that happen, is viruses, hacking, Trojans, worms, malware, and a real big one is advertisements. I think we all can agree that advertisements is a pain in our backside because we get bombarded in our emails, we get bombarded on television, we get bombarded on practically everywhere we go. And if you guys are a lot like me, I get sick and tired of it. So one of the other things, and I'll cover this in a different video, is I use Piehole as my DNS to block 95% of the ads. Now, granted, it doesn't catch everything, but I figured 95% is better than not having anything at all. The benefit of Piehole, it's free and it's open source, and it runs on the Linux platform. You can also run a virtual machine. You can run Docker and all that stuff. However, I just use one virtual machine and one dedicated server for right now, which that'll be changing. However, the process for Piehole is the same whether you use virtual, whether you use a dedicated server either in a data center or in your own home. Initially, I found out about it when it was on Raspberry Pi. I have this thing that if something new comes out, I have a tendency to try it. But that again, that's another video for another day. One of the part of my network is using the Unify system. Now, I will tell you the issue with Unify is the fact that its firewall is not as strong and robust as I like it, because I like to have total control of everything that comes in and out, because I run servers at various times. I have the home security system routed through my network amongst some other devices, smart devices, light bulbs, that sort of thing. So Unify does a pretty good job at letting you set up networks and things that are you can separate the IoT devices from your network, because that becomes a security issue. And then it also allows easy configuration with the controller. And I use a unified Dream Machine Pro, which this is what the screen will look like if you happen to use one. The problem that I have with unified Dream Machine Pro is that you almost have to have internet access to set this thing up. You can't set it up without being online, which makes no sense. I've got issues with that because let's say you've got a router that's controlling 4 or 5 locations, then you want the UDM Pro, then you want this router, that it becomes a pain in the backside. So after you get this configured, you will have a login screen that looks similar to this. Now, I've typed in my username. My password obviously is blacked out because y'all don't need to see it. If this is on your internal network, then you can have it remember your credentials. If this is your personal desktop laptop, then you can do the same. Once you type your stuff in, you can hit the sign in button, and it'll take you to the screen. Now, this screen can be configured to look different because they've got Unify Protect, they've got the cameras, they've got access and all sorts of other things. However, those are kind of redundant for the prosumer home user type situation. So most people are going to have a screen that looks like this. You'll have one program, click on the network. One of the things that I find interesting about Unify is the whole platform. the dashboard. It gives you a real good, glance at everything that you've got. Whereas me, I've got 10 switches throughout my house. I've got 7 access points, and then I have, give or take, 22 devices connected to the wireless network. Now this, it ranges from the Amazon Echo to the phones, tablets, laptops, you name it. It could be endless. It also will list my IoT devices, which I'll get into that later on. Then down below it has the Wi-Fi traffic distribution. It has all the channels that my access points are capable of using. Because I have a wireless B going on. I have wireless G. I have wireless N. Then I have wireless AC. Although I'm going to be phasing out some of those because all the devices are within the last year and a half, 2 years, so I can get rid of some of that. Then below that you have Wi-Fi metrics. Now, this really came in handy for a few weeks ago when I was running into issues with my smart devices and things of that sort, breaking down, having issues, latency, the whole 9 yards. As you can see, my Wi-Fi issues are within acceptable limits. So that's what gives me a brief overview if there's any network issues, things of that sort. And then down here it shows, under Wi-Fi clients, it shows the peak when, how many clients I have and things of that sort. You'll notice that, overnight and early morning hours there isn't too much going on. That's just because, work and, all funds, shit like that. Then, there's a map option. You can upload a map of your property using Google Earth. I'm not going to show that because of obvious reasons. Below that you have the devices. Now the nice thing about you've got 2 different ways to view your devices. You've got the list, which is like what you see on the screen now. And the nice thing about that is, if I have to restart a device, I can just click the restart button. Okay, same thing with over here in the wired. Alright, I can just click the restart button, or if I'm trying to find a particular switch, then I can hit the locate button. And then you've got the all option, which has every device that's on your network. Now this is just switches and access points, and then the UDM Pro. This is not your laptops, things like that. I'll show you that here in a minute. Or if you do not like this particular view, then you can click up here in the right hand corner, click on the 4 squares, and then it actually shows pictures of the various devices that you would have. While this is not too bad, I personally prefer the listing, just for the fact I can hit the restart button if I were to need to. But let's say you prefer this for whatever reason, you can click on that. And then the nice thing about Unify is that it brings up the properties on the side of the screen. And then if you need to make any changes, you can hit the little gear icon, and then it'll bring up the option to change. However, once you make all your changes, it'll have an option to queue the changes. You need to queue the changes and then hit the apply, so it can write the changes to the actual device. In most cases, it will automatically provision. But let's say for some reason you're having an issue with the device or whatever, you can click the provision button and it will force it to provision. Now you'll get a confirmation box that looks similar to this, so you'll hit the confirm button and it will automatically provision it. Now, since I've not made any changes, it's not going to affect anything. So once the provision, you'll see it down below where my mouse is pointing at, that it will say provisioning. Well, as you can see, it didn't take long because, again, I didn't make any changes. So, and then I like I said, I have the switch. I also run fiber. That's for an experimental thing I'm trying to nail down. My router, however, is the UDM Pro. The UDM Pro has a lot of options built into it that I myself do not necessarily use because it comes down to Unifi's cameras are being overpriced. I mean, you can get their cameras depending on what you get. I think $300-400 a piece. Then you can put a hard drive in this thing and record all your video. Again, I think it's ridiculously overpriced for the prosumer, home user, that sort of thing, and even for a business aspect, I still got issues with the pricing on that. So, but you do not have to have a hard drive or anything like that. Now, then once you get all that set up, you got everything. Then once you connect everything, I mentioned earlier that we have the clients. Now this gets interesting because let's say you want to provide Wi-Fi, which I did during the pandemic. Because people lost their jobs. We had a bunch of kids where I'm at. They needed internet access. They couldn't afford it, so I opened up a portion of my network so they could do their schoolwork and things like that. Since apparently the schools decided it would be fun to make that a requirement and not really help the parents get the equipment they needed. But anyways, that's beside the point. So let's say you open up a portion of your network and you decide to provide Wi-Fi access. As you can see, all these devices that are IoT is my smart devices, light bulbs, things of that sort. So let's say you make a network named Wi-Fi, and you open that up, for the people around you. It will actually show the devices are connected to that particular network. And let's say somebody's hogging all your bandwidth, which we'll get into later videos on how to do that, how to partition bandwidth and things like that in a later date. You can actually hit the block button and it will block that device using the MAC address, as I understand it, from ever getting back on your network. Comes in handy if you're going to do the Wi-Fi thing. You don't have to. I did it, like I said, just because I live in a close-knit community. And then in the same similar way, you've got you can block hardwired devices. Now I don't think that I've ever had to block a hardwired device, because all the hardwired devices are either my servers, printers, occasionally might be laptop, it's my desktop, stuff like that. So I very rarely have ever had to block a hardware device. So there's that. And then over here, if you want to know the statistical data, how much data you moving, things like that. This part is really good. I've moved 3.38 terabytes of data so far. I believe this is on a monthly schedule. I'm not entirely certain yet. However, if you look over here by this circle here, it also has a streaming media, which is obviously Hulu, Netflix, that sort of thing. Then you've got network protocols, which could be just about anything. And then you've got games, which could be like games on your phone. It could be your Xbox, that sort of thing. Web and file transfer is pretty well self-explanatory. I don't have to go into that. If you want to break down even more specific, it tells you what app uses how much. So for example, Hulu, 422 gigs. Amazon Instant Video, which is the Prime, has 253 gigs, so on and so forth. iTunes, I don't use iTunes, but that was from where I had to open Wi-Fi, and I'll set that back up again probably tomorrow night as a how-to. Over here, network protocols is broken down to HTTP, SSL, TLS, that sort of thing, which, we'll get into all that in a later date. And then over here, you got games, which, it can be your Xbox and be EA, like, the Simpsons, the Sims, things like that. And then Origin, which is, like a platform you log into, you can download, play games or whatever with that. Then you got, any game platform will show up there. If you want to get interested in the specific traffic, then it'll give you a little bit there. But, again, I don't monitor that too horribly much unless I start getting flags, and I'll show you where those are at. Now, if you want, you can go specific apps, and it'll tell you exactly what app is using how much data, and that's, that sort of thing. For example, YouTube's 219 megs. That's where I've, started researching how to do this, streaming stuff. Right now, I'm just recording until I can get everything figured out. Then it goes on. Anything that you have on your network, it most likely will show up here, unless they use a VPN, which that is something totally different. And then if you want to narrow it down to the specific devices, this is where it gets interesting. Because you can look at, see who's using the most data. And usually it sorts everything out, but the biggest to the top. And then, the rest of it, just kind of self-explanatory. A lot of these that are, these are smart devices, so you can see they're not using, too much data. So, this one here is my desktop unit. So, it's going to be pulling more information. So the next thing we have is the insights, section. This will, give you an idea of, who the client is, if there's a fixed IP, or technically speaking, a static IP address, it'll be listed here. Most of my stuff is, DHCP. Then over here, it'll tell it. In most cases, it'll tell you what the brand name device. Like I said, I've got a Canon printer here. I've got a router access device there. I've got Windows PCs. I have Linux. I have Ring. I've got Wisecam. So you get the idea what that does. Now, the next one is threat management, which kind of leads into the second video that I'm planning on doing. This will detect any threats to your network. As you can see, I have a list of countries that I have blocked, and the reason being is that these are, where I believe, network attacks have originated. So, any traffic coming from or, going to these countries are blocked. And that's just a safety measure. And then you have another option that says traffic log, which will, show different things. It will, over in the category, it talks, it'll have scan, Trojan, whatever the case is. Lucky mine's just scans for right now. Then the type, it'll tell you the different types of activity. The severity, the only thing that I really, monitor is if I get a high alert. And then it'll tell you where the stuff has come from. And then the source address, which is going to be inside stuff. And then destination. And then the last recorded, threat. So I've had a few threats, but the security pretty well took care of that. Now, I've also, have a few other options. You got the events thing down here, and it tells you what device is connected to what access point. Now, this will come in handy if you have to troubleshoot any particular issues. I haven't used it yet. For example, if I do, administrative work, it shows here. If, there are LAN devices, it shows here. Same thing with the wireless. And then down here is the alerts button. The alerts button will list, anytime that anything has happened. disconnects, radar scans, that sort of thing. And then occasional threat management issues. It comes in handy again when we get in more into the security option, in the second video. Then in the settings is where all the configuration for the network, happens. And I will, we'll get into the specifics. You got wireless networks, then you've got your networks, you got routing, firewall, threat management, the whole 9 yards. We'll be configuring, certain things, as we go on. This is a brief overview of the internal network. So now, because I indicated that Unify does not, do all that great with their firewalls, I actually have went and put in Mikrotik. Mikrotik is it's a learning curve for me. It's not bad. I will be doing a video on that later on after I learn how to do it and I get everything set up. Mikrotik is pretty, for what you get, it's actually pretty decent. But you will need to know a little bit about Linux command line, that sort of thing, if you do not have the option for the web interface, which, as you can see, I do. And when I set these things up, I always have two options. The first option is the web interface. Second option is the command line interface, especially dealing with Linux. Now, I know there's IT pros out there that are going to tell you that the web interface is for babies, that sort of thing. No, I prefer to keep it simple, especially when I got to make quick changes, and I may not even be in my office. I may have my laptop, and I may be sitting at a Burger King or McDonald's. So I need to keep things a little simple. But, it has, firewalls, it has the whole 9 yards. Because this is a Linux kernel, as I understand it, it's fairly secure, but again, nothing's 100% foolproof because this is how it's set up in my office. I've got my internet connection coming in, and then I have to use the stinking modem that the cable company gives. Then I have, from my cable modem, I have an SFP converter. Again, this is going into, I'm picking up and learning fiber. And then from the SFP converter, I have fiber going into my Mikrotik, and then from my Mikrotik, then I have an Ethernet going into my Dream Machine, and then from my Dream Machine, then I use SFP on my switches and things where I can. Again, I know they're not necessary, but I'm doing it to teach myself on how to do this sort of thing. And then the one thing that I've changed is I mentioned briefly about Piehole. Piehole is the DNS that, again, blocks all the ads. As you can see, I've got, how many queries, and I've got how many queries were blocked, the percentage of the traffic, and then I've got the domains on the block list. Now, again, some of this is going to change. I'm still tweaking it. This is a virtual machine. It's no different than a dedicated machine. I'll be changing that over probably the end of this week, as long as everything else works. So Piehole, like I indicated earlier, is the fact that it will block 95% of the ads. However, it's a conflict trying to block some of the crap that Google puts in YouTube, but I haven't quite gotten that squared away like I thought I did. However, it is in the works, and when I get that figured out, I will definitely be publishing a video on how to do all of that sort of thing. So, with that being said, this is the end of the first video for the channel. I will be posting the next video. I will be going into more detail on some things you can do on your network that will help secure it, such as Wi-Fi passwords, Wi-Fi WPA2, and WPA3 is coming out. However, that's an issue. which we'll get into all of that in the next video. In the meantime, if you have any, questions, comments, feel free to leave a comment down below, and then click on the bell and subscribe, because I'll be uploading videos on a regular basis, maybe 2 to 3 times a week. I mean, it depends on the work schedule. But yeah, in the meantime, leave comments. I will try to read each of your comments, and then I will, try to reply back. And I will eventually be, updating my website, getting that working, and I will list like FAQs and things like that, and I will, put links and stuff to some of the sources that I've used, down below. So, in the meantime, as always, any questions, feel free to, let me know, and I will do